Chapter 16. Travel. We were in Bethlehem eating makluba, an Arab dish of rice, chicken, and vegetables. What makes it especially unique to this part of the world are the spices, a combination of paprika, coriander, cinnamon, turmeric, and sumac. It's the lasagna of Palestine, and everyone debates how best to make the dish. Should you cook the chicken separately in the oven or in the pot with all the vegetables and rice? Makluba means upside down in Arabic. After you've cooked the dish, you flip it upside down onto a large platter. Upside down was more than the name of a meal, as it soon became a metaphor for our trip. After 2 weeks of touring the ancient stones and the living stones of Jerusalem, Israel, and Palestine, Robert and Rita were experiencing an upside-down world. As we sat in the residence of our hosts on the Mount of Olives, Robert confided in me. We had just heard a talk given by an Israeli father who had lost his son in a conflict with Palestinian men, and had also listened to a presentation by a Palestinian Muslim woman who described her husband's killing in a traffic altercation with Israeli soldiers. Robert spoke quietly to me. You know, when we first signed up for this trip and heard we would be meeting with Palestinians, I thought that meant we'd be meeting with terrorists. His wife nodded in agreement. I had no idea that Palestinians could be Christians, or that they could be doctors, engineers, pastors, and teachers. My whole view of this part of the world is... He stammered, struggling to find the word. I finally said, turned upside down? Yes. We all three then laughed as we made the connection to the meal. Robert and Rita signed up for a travel tour that they thought would help them understand the Bible, as they could see, hear, breathe, and walk in the land we sometimes call holy. Maybe they'd deepen their faith. And indeed, that did happen. 2 weeks of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and the villages along the Sea of Galilee had helped them connect with David, Solomon, Isaiah, and Jesus. But what they hadn't expected was the encounter with the living stones of the contemporary people. Visiting the schools and hospitals on the West Bank, sharing meals in the homes of Palestinian Christians, attending worship in Lutheran congregations, and touring the schools where Christians and Muslims learned together, all of these experiences opened Robert and Rita's worldview. The Palestinian people were no longer characters in a story on the TV news. They were people struggling in incredibly difficult circumstances to live faithful lives, raise children, and make meaningful contributions to their society. Travel upends, challenges, and alters your worldview. It forces you to engage in life from new perspectives. Whether your trip is to the Holy Land or to the Grand Ole Opera House, your travels impact you in surprising ways. Any travel is a pilgrimage. Religions throughout history have had a spiritual practice of pilgrimage. Christians journey to Jerusalem, Muslims make a pilgrimage to Mecca, Hindus go to the Ganges River, and native peoples have engaged in various forms of travel, sometimes just over the mountain. Pilgrimage is a spiritual engagement with the unknown, with the new. In some cases, the pilgrim is going to an historically designated holy place, so chosen because the founder of the religion, or a well-known follower, had previously lived, died, or been born there. Woven into many of the books that make up the Christian Bible is the theme of pilgrimage. It is a multifaceted concept that includes ideas of journey, experiencing exile, living as a sojourner or pilgrim, and the quest for a homeland. The Apostle Paul is among the most well-known travelers of the Bible. If his writings are even close to being accurate, it's possible he traveled over 10,000 miles during his lifetime. These miles would likely qualify him for gold status in the Mediterranean Frequent Flyer Club. His travels did not reflect the first-class cabin benefits of modern travel. In his second letter to the people of Corinth, Paul describes some of the dangers of traveling. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I passed a night and a day on the deep, on frequent journeys, in dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own race, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, in toil and hardship, through many sleepless nights, through hunger and thirst, through frequent fastings, through cold and exposure. 2 Corinthians 11. During his lifetime, Paul makes at least 4 significant trips, and along the way he discovers new cultures and encounters the joys and travails of travel. He also detects the presence of God as he travels. But pilgrimage can also be an adventure to a seemingly ordinary place, where extraordinary discoveries take place. In 1981, following graduation from college, I set out on a different sort of pilgrimage. At the time, no particular religious or spiritual journey was involved. Instead, it was a simple task. My friend Mark had moved to Minnesota for a job and needed his car brought to him. So I volunteered to drive his 1974 maroon Datsun from Los Angeles to Minneapolis. I said yes under one condition, that I could take my time and make the trip the long way. He agreed. He flew to Minnesota, and after a few days of gathering sufficient camping gear, I headed north along the California coast. After weeks of my meandering travels, I found myself in search of a campsite off the interstate outside of Livingston, Montana. It was late, and I was tired, so I pulled off at the exit and drove down a country road until I found a place to park. In the dark, I set up my small tent and slid into my sleeping bag. I woke to the sound of munching. Yes, munching, combined with the light pitter-patter of raindrops on my tent. I emerged to find myself surrounded by a herd of cattle grazing. They were as spooked by me as I of them. Suddenly, the light rain turned to hail. The cattle scattered for shelter, and in but a few frantic moments I was able to stuff my soaking wet tent and sleeping bag into the back of the Datsun. As I headed down the highway, I discovered a problem that would vex me for the rest of this trip. No heat. Despite my attempts to fix the controls, I would spend the next several days driving a tin can through the rain and cold covered in blankets and coats, wearing a ski cap and gloves. Was I discovering the transition from the safety of college to what's next? It took me years to realize what I learned on that trip, namely, that I was going to be okay out in the cold world. Most in the U.S. like to travel in a controlled manner, reservations booked in advance, Rick Steves videos previewed, and guided tours secured. Safe? Most definitely. Spontaneous? Hardly. Yet, our most memorable events in life, as in travel, are the unexpected detours we took, the challenges we overcame, and yes, even those times we got lost. Take a moment and think back on your travels through the years, whether those were around the world or across the county. What do you remember? Most significantly, what stories do you tell about your trip? Travel takes us out of our comfort zone, and that, my friends, is a spiritual pilgrimage. Even your summer vacation to the beach is a religious pilgrimage. As you discover new places, new foods, new cultures, you are engaging in an ancient practice of spiritual pilgrimage. My niece recently came from Colorado for a short visit. Among the many things we exposed her to was a trip to Aunt Carrie's for the Rhode Island delicacy of Johnny cakes, which are clams cooked in a biscuit-like batter. I also had her taste my green kale smoothie. When she returned home to her high school friends, was it the meal at Subway she recalled? No, it was the weird foods they eat in Rhode Island. Travel takes us to new places, new cultures, new people, new food, new music. The simple act of travel is a spiritual act. The sacred journeys to the unknown keeps us alert and open to discoveries about our world and about ourselves. Surely that's another way we practice everyday spirituality, no matter how frequently we travel.